Linux OTC. Welcome to episode 11. We're your hosts. I'm Bill.
I'm Norbert,
I'm Leo.
Scat.
and I hope not to disappear. I have been running Hyprland for, I think, almost 2 months.
Oh, Norbert,
It's
where'd you go?
Oh well, I'm here. Yeah,
Norbert.
it's a Wayland compositor slash
Yeah, I've
window
heard of
manager.
that. What's it look
And
like?
It has really nice eye candy, and I'm not in the sense that it looks pretty because it has animations, but the animations, I actually at one point I told Leo that I like Sway specifically because it has no animations at all. But now since I've been using this, it's really nice to uh, get the visual feedback of where windows are moving and stuff like that. It even has the gnome like one-to-one touchpad gestures, which I really like on a laptop.
How can I look at this Hyperland thing?
Hyperland.org.
Hyperland, but
and then-
without the letter E.
Oh.
Oh, okay.
oh.
Yeah.
Yeah. Where'd you
typed-
go, Bill?
Well,
I
I
mean-
just Google searched.
Yeah, you know,
I say
all-
Google. I duck goed.
Yeah.
Oh, I said
All-
Google. My phone
You know,
went
all
nuts.
all FOSS projects have to have a quirky name, a weird
Yeah.
name to them.
Ah, see, so
That's what makes them magical.
So it's got blur. That's like
Yeah.
the only thing I require for.
Yeah,
desktop.
you like Blur, yeah.
Oh yeah.
So
yeah. Oh yeah.
Sway is
You know
very
what
stable.
this looks like? It looks like that Maui thing that we was talking about a year ago.
Maui kit. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's for man. That's actually coming along pretty well. It's looking
Yeah.
really good on the phone, man. One
I
day,
gotta
maybe.
give this a look because this looks
Yeah.
proper modern.
Nah, man.
The reason I said I hope I won't
That's too
disappear
much
because
work.
it is it's not stable yet. It's on version 0.26.
Yeah, Bill
and I
doesn't
already
care
f-
about stability. He's running
and-
on Alpha Audacity, dude.
Yeah, we're literally
I
using
already
alpha
found,
software right now.
I already found two things that I can't do because they consistently crash the entire compositor. One of them is, I think it might have been fixed by now, in when GTK2 apps dragging stuff in GIMP, which is basically the only GTK2 app I use, like dragging, reordering tabs would crash it. And the other thing is there's something called FCITX, which
Mhm.
I use to when I want to have Japanese input. Which and
okay.
if I start that on Hyperland and I tried it on multiple distros, it also crashes the compositor. So I will have to. I guess I should report that as a bug because
So what
if I am using
compositor
unstable
is it
software,
using?
it is the compositor itself.
Oh,
Well, the thing about Wayland is that on traditionally, if you're running X, you have the display server, which is the Windows X server.
Right.
You have the window manager, which is whatever your desktop uses. Matter for GNOME and Cinnamon for Muffin for Cinnamon and Kevin for KDE. And then you also have a compositor, which is sometimes there are window managers that can do compositing. I think Matter does that, and also XFC's window manager can do compositing. But on bare bones window managers, you also have to have a third thing, which is a compositor that you would run. On the Wayland side, all of those three things are one in the same. So if you're running GNOME, then Matter is your display server. I guess we could use that term here, and your compositor and your window manager. So the same goes for Sway and Hyperland. So it's a 3-in-1 thing.
so basically, in order for Wayland to work, all of the developers for the compositing engines have to be working along with the Wayland thing because they're taking on the task of their traditional workflow in addition to performing compositing tasks.
Yeah,
How
in a way,
dare they
yes.
take independent projects and
Just
merge them into one
expect
monolithic
people to do
project?
your job
They
for
are
you.
not really doing that
It's like
because
System D.
they're not really. I mean, in a way, it's a good thing because the big problem with Xorg was and
Well,
the
this
X,
is what the System D guys
yeah.
said too. I mean,
Yeah.
the whole problem with it is that it wasn't consistent. There was no consistency there.
well, consistency is good.
Oh no!
I mean-
no. Okay,
I
you
mean-
heard it here first, folks.
Oh,
Norbert's all in on System D, loves it.
unless it's consistently
I like it
bad,
Because-
and then
because
that's
because I know how to use it, and
Yeah.
Me too.
it behaves as I expected. But
Yeah,
you know,
since like
in,
CentOS 7, man. You had to know it. So I've had to know it.
the
You
big
can't
thing,
get away from it.
important thing about Xorg is that Xorg itself was also consistent because it was the same, more or less the same display server on everywhere you were running anything graphical. But that meant that everything was in the same it was one big code base, and it was getting really big and was hard to
Yeah.
maintain. So
Spaghetti code.
The reason on Wayland you have all these separate projects is that the base Wayland protocol is very minimal. So if you were just to use that and create a desktop, it would probably not be very usable. So Wayland uses a very small uh, base implementation with extensions. So various implementations can have various implementations. So currently the three big implementations are GNOME, KDE, and Wroots. So everything that is not GNOME or KDE is using the Wroots library, which I think they are trying to work together with KDE to make them more standardized across the two.
So okay, let me get this straight. So does that kind of mean that like nowadays, uh, like all these apps are based on GTK? This doesn't have anything to do with that, the Wlroots thing.
Uh, the only way I would think is that GTK itself, GTK 3 and 4 both support Xorg and Wayland, but GTK 4 has can do graphical acceleration, which GTK 3 is not capable of as far
Does
as
it
I know.
help to think of WL roots and things of the like as more of an API layer that
Yeah.
these things have to? Yeah. Um,
I'm
I,
not sure. I think that's
it makes sense to me.
yeah.
Uh, I feel like I've been writing kind of two worlds with this for a long time because on Arch with KDE, I've been using it for years, and I've kind of watched it get better and better and better. And the things that it wouldn't do for a long time that I needed fixed are seem to be fixed at this point. But then sitting here, I'm on Mint Cinnamon, which we don't necessarily have a clear roadmap as to when it's going to be implemented on there. Um, I feel like if it works on GNOME, eventually we're not going to have much choice because everything that Cinnamon is, unless I'm mistaken, is sort of based on
Yeah.
past versions of GNOME.
And they
So
recently, originally it was based on the GNOME 3 version of Matter,
yeah,
but last year or the year before that they rebased it to Matter to
yeah.
I think the 3.36 equivalent maybe. The interesting thing about Matter and Kwin is that you can run GNOME and KDE on both Xorg and Wayland. So when you're running them on Wayland, they are decompositors. But when you are running them on Xorg, they act as X window managers. So I wonder if they achieved that in the same binary. So is it that just the one Matter binary that can either act as a Wayland compositor or a X window manager?
Gotta get on the GNOME
Well,
forums for that one, man.
so you got X Wayland, and if you think of it as a compatibility layer, it's just kind of passing on
Yeah.
the
And that's why
the
everything
calls.
looks
It's
terrible when you
yeah,
scale.
it's passing on
X,
those calls
yeah.
to X Wayland if it can't.
X Wayland is basically a fake X screen. When
Yeah.
you open an app that has no Wayland compatibility whatsoever, and it's looking for the X display to draw its window, to put its window there, to request its window drawn.
And you can
The
tell too.
X Wayland says, look, here's an X window, you can draw your window there, and then X Wayland just puts that on your Wayland screen.
And it's not perfect. I've got a couple apps. I mean, fortunately, they're just the kind of apps where you read something and then type something in. Like, oh, I know, I don't want to hear it. Grub Customizer.
Oh my God!
I don't want to hear it.
Oh, you're gonna hear it.
I got it. I mean, Arch. I
from
mean, it's
the
still
on multiple
they.
levels.
Yeah. Well, I use it
You'll
because I
never
have
be able to fix what you break, man. If it
I have to
breaks,
be able to make. Uh, I have to be able to make fonts
you
for
have
it
to be able
because
to make
it's a.
peace with the fact that Grub is just going to be toast if it
Well, you
ever
know, I
dies.
use Grub because I've got my laptops are completely encrypted, root and home. So Grub seems to be the one that works better with that.
How
Yeah,
With
I
the
come?
also went back to using Grub on my desktop with Silverblue because it just comes with Grub by default, and I don't want to layer other things on top of Silverblue. And
yeah,
it
I
How
mean,
handles the switching by default between the versions.
how come, Bill? Why do you
well,
encrypt?
I'm sure that you could probably get system D boot to work, but you get when you use the Arch install scrap, it gives you. I mean, it goes with system D boot by default, and then you go through the actions of encrypting everything, and then it won't boot. It can't find the root. And I found fixes for that, but it requires you getting in and getting fiddly with it. And whereas if you just tell it to use Grub instead, it just works. So I mean, the only thing I used Grub Customizer for was to create bigger fonts because it's a 15-inch screen at 4K. So if you just let Grub do its thing, you can't read it even with these glasses on.
That's what a
So
magnifying glass is for. You just got to have it handy, ready to
yeah,
go.
right. And so I just use it to create the because it's an easy way to. I mean, there is a Grub make font convoluted command that's about this long that you could do, but Grub Customizer just pick it and then go. I mean, but the point I was trying to make was that's one of those apps that has to have X Wayland, and you can see everything is crystal clear, sharp on the screen. You bring up something that's using X Wayland, and it
Blurry.
looks yeah like it's trying and failing at something,
Yeah.
So
Like these apps look slightly out of focus, and it's not just like the content of the app. It's like the window controls and everything else too. Like just the whole thing is
you can
slightly out
tell
of
it's using
focus.
something outside of the normal protocols to make
Yeah,
that.
and it looks like Gnome announced a couple days ago that they're building in the scaling stuff. It's gonna look pretty much like what Windows and Mac. Well, actually, it's gonna look exactly like the Mac one, where you have essentially like little windows in the settings window, and it's got different sizes of fonts. What it will look like if you scale to this particular thing. It's got the warning down at the bottom, like Mac does, where it says not all applications will look perfectly
Yeah.
in these scaling modes, whatever. Um, but I think
KDE
that's really
Plasma has
cool.
something similar to that where you can choose to either allow Plasma to do the scaling or allow its own toolkit to do it, which allowing its own toolkit never seems to work. So
Yeah. But I think that's really cool because it signals that GNOME is actually putting the work in to get scaling as good as it can be, and I
I,
need
you
scaling.
know,
I have to
you
have
say
it.
what you want about GNOME. I think they've been doing, and the people that are behind GNOME have been doing a lot of the heavy lifting for a very long time with a lot of these new technologies that are moving us forward. It's a lot of the same people.
Oh
And
yeah, yeah, and I don't know, man. They butt heads a lot with folks that want them to do it a different way, but they're the ones doing the work,
yeah,
man. So I don't know. I guess if you're contributing code and they're just slapping it down, that's a different kind of situation. But uh, yeah, I mean,
you never
people.
get that idea with GNOME. You always feel as though, and I don't use it, but its quality though I think is
Yeah,
notable because if it doesn't
It's
work, it won't be put in. So.
it's one of the
I
best desktops out there, man. What are you gonna do? It
But
is.
that's kind
It
of
is what it
my
is.
my attitude about Mint too, because it's here on this machine that I use for some of my most serious work, and I don't want Clem putting it in until he knows that everything is going to work to the degree that a Mint user expects.
Yep.
I wonder how
And
much they can uh, bring over from Gnome's implementation.
it seems like it ought to
Because
be quite a bit.
because I know that currently XFCE, they are working on their Wayland session, and at one point I heard that they were trying to use they wanted to go the Wroots route, and maybe that's no longer the case. I will have to check on that, but because how Cinnamon how close it is to GNOME and Matter, I think it would make sense to make it to use the same. The thing about GNOME, I have to give credit where credit is due. If you want the most stable Wayland experience, it's currently GNOME, because that's where the majority. Because
dare
as
you
far
say
as
this.
implementation,
Get it out of here.
Oh man.
and I'm using it on my desktop in
Oh, that's
with,
that's 2 strikes, Norbert.
with-
I knew that
Strikes.
about
You're
it,
about to
but
be
I
off the
wasn't.
three
show.
because I'm using it with the proprietary NVIDIA drivers. 3 strikes.
You're done. You're done.
And I'm out. Well, I will probably be out soon because Hyprland
You want this
will crash for
NVIDIA
me.
card laying on my table behind me?
Oh man.
I don't know what I'm going to do with that stupid
And
thing.
so I
Put
think
it in a shadow box, dude, hanging up behind you. And just
Well,
be
you know,
like,
the
graveyard.
weird thing about it is it works just as good as this one does with the Nuvo driver. but
I
I've
know what
been-
you could do with it. You could just run Windows.
the thing about the Nuvo drivers is your experience greatly depends on what card you are using. As far as I'm aware, older cards they work better with Nuvo because
Well, it's like the
because-
kernel, right? Like it's better hardware support,
Yeah.
but it takes time.
and I'm not sure if it's the kernel. I mean, I think Nuvo was mainly designed for not the current latest generation of NVIDIA cards. So if you have like so I have a 1060, and on some distros, like I think it was Debian, it was very laggy with Nuvo. So if you have a card that is older than that, so maybe a 900 series, maybe that Nuvo would work better.
Well, it would work better if you just didn't have NVIDIA in the first place.
Yep.
I do because I like it on the Windows side, but on my in my laptop.
That's 4 strikes. That's 4.
4 strikes.
You're not
4.
doing so well, Norbert. We're going to
Can
have
I-
to have
yeah.
a talk.
It's over.
Can I redeem myself? In my laptop, I have no NVIDIA card, and I would never buy an NVIDIA laptop because, well,
they get hot.
Yeah, well, in a laptop, what I look for the most is battery life, and I
Yeah.
don't do much in terms of graphics intensive stuff. So even if I get a framework at one point, I'm not sure if I would want to get one of those swappable.
So you
dedicated
just want
GPUs
battery
for it.
life? That's the main thing?
Yeah, I.
Oh,
would
so you want an
probably-
M1 Mac then? To get like a used one.
Well,
You
if-
you
know,
fell
you
right
five
into the
strikes.
trap. I mean,
you intend it as a joke, but when Asahi Linux gets to the point where it's perfect,
Oh, the battery life won't be there. But you could just run Mac OS and then run Brew and then get all your stuff that way.
I'm
See?
already running Brew.
God, I feel like I,
know
need a
that's what I
shower
mean.
now.
That's, you
Strike
get a
5
Mac
maybe.
and then you get a Mac and then nothing changes. You're in the terminal 90% of the time and you're good. You're good, man.
Yeah. Can I install Bash? Well, maybe I could get used to ZSH.
No, you could install Bash. You can get Bash from Brew, so you're good.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
And
So Bash
macOS
isn't-
is an immutable system, so that's also nice.
See, and you're on. Yeah.
Well, you're all in on this immutable thing, aren't you, Norbert?
No, the reason why I started thinking about it is that I have 4 devices with Linux, and I don't want to have to think about keeping 4 devices up to date. Here's my laptop that I use most of the time. I like tinkering with it. I thought about maybe trying OpenSUSE Micro OS because it's less, as far as I know, it's less. It's easier to install stuff on it than on Silverblue. But on my desktop, I have Silverblue. It auto updates in the background, doesn't change the system. When it reboots, it gets the new system. And because it's the uBlue image, it has the tested NVIDIA kernel module. That's nice. On my tablet, I've been waiting for Debian 12, and now they had the 4th release candidate, so I put that on there because I only use the tablet for sometimes watching movies, so I don't want to worry about updates. So Debian 12 is another way for me to not have to worry
I
about
haven't
updates.
looked at Debian in a while. Does their official ISO come with the non-free drivers
Yep.
now?
Yeah, it
Oh,
does.
that's actually kind of cool.
They will have the official release on the 10th, so a week from now.
That'll
But
be
I
Oh,
kind of
just
so
nice.
speaking of
yeah.
the micro OS thing, they renamed those. They're not micro OS anymore.
Yeah, they have I don't know I don't remember the names, but they also have fancy
Eon,
names like
Eon for the GNOME one,
hmm,
and Kalpa for the KDE
hmm.
one.
But I know what Eon means. Is it with an A or an E?
A
A,
AE.
I'm not sure what that means.
Oh, is that
I know
supposed to
that
be
It
that
it means the
archaic
same thing
A?
it always means, man.
yeah, I know that the Fedora ones are named after minerals, except for Silverblue. So the KDE one is kinoite, the XFC one is bauxite, and the Sway one is Sericea. I want to say. Yeah, so I think those are all minerals.
I do not pay attention enough to the immutable
Yeah,
stuff to know.
I'm not sure if these names might be confusing. So in my I think it was I've heard uh what's the name of the Fedora lead
Like a
Matthew
Miller?
Miller.
Matthew
I
Miller, yeah.
in a interview I heard Matthew Miller say that they want to that what he would personally like is to have the Fedora Atomic as the brand name.
Yeah, I was
So
gonna say because
yeah,
that is confusing. Like, what is a Kino White? If I
yeah.
come across that,
So
how am I
and
supposed to know that
yeah,
that's KDE or
yeah.
whatever that is?
I like to think of these as code names because I when
You
we
know
get
it's
there.
KDE because it starts with a K, Leo.
Well, I guess. But what about the Voxite?
You know,
What
I
is what does
haven't
that tell me?
actually put one and one together. I haven't realized that Kinoite is Kinoite because it starts with a K.
Well, so
Yeah,
is Kalpa.
that's like the
Oh,
first thing I
OpenSUSE
thought.
Yeah,
Yeah, OpenSUSE Kalpa is the same way. It starts with a K,
yeah,
right? But
yeah.
how do I know that GNOME is associated with Eon? How do I know that XFCE on the Fedora side is associated with Voxite? How am I supposed to
Well,
know any of this stuff? What
uh,
does that tell me?
There's like
I
a
was
whole community around this.
I was in the macOS installer yesterday because I wanted to check something how it does the partitioning. And you can select macOS minimal. You can select macOS GNOME. In parentheses it says RC, and there's the KDE one where it says alpha. So maybe these are also just code names.
I mean, I
So
hope so. I
going
hope
back,
there's some kind
yeah,
of umbrella name because
yeah.
there's no way for me to know what any of this stuff actually
Maybe
is.
their plan is that whenever we get to the point where these will be the main offerings of the distros, they just drop the names and they will be just called Fedora
Yeah.
and
Was it
OpenSUSE.
was it here that we were talking about that when we
Yeah.
were thinking
Yeah.
about when that's actually going to happen? Yeah. I don't know, man. I don't know if that will ever happen. Yeah. I mean, I'd
I
like it to. That'd be really cool because then it would make them a whole lot more reliable, I think.
I
Um,
actually really like the name Fedora, no, the MicroOS, because it's short, it's to the point. But I guess it's called
oh,
that
until what
because,
point though?
well, I don't know. You know, there's Fedora
Short,
Core.
yes.
The Fedora's immutable version of the stripped down system is Fedora Core. So Fedora Core and Fedora and OpenSUSE MicroOS,
Okay, I got you.
those names make sense. But
There's a
whenever,
cool GitHub page here called Awesome Immutable, and they've got
yeah,
a rather
it's by George
exhaustive
Castro.
list. Yeah,
And I was browsing that quite a bit.
I mean it's
And
pretty exhaustive list.
I noticed that I think Clear Linux wasn't on the list.
Is that immutable?
Clear's not immutable.
In a way, yes, because it's funny how the different distros try to implement the immutability in very different ways. So Clear Linux, their focus is on just separating the system files from the config. So when you install Clear Linux, the /etc folder is empty because any configuration that is default lives somewhere else. So if you want to change a config, you copy it to etc and you modify it. And if you want to revert to the default config, you just delete the files from etc. And if it
That's
doesn't
kinda cool.
see them,
I
it
like
just
that.
falls back. So that's one way. Silverblue with the image base OS3, they are trying to do the bit by bit similar to just the identical systems deployed. So you're not really supposed to overlay packages, but you can if you really have to. And
So what about-
MicroOS is, as far as I can tell, they just do, if you want to do anything as root, install packages, you go into a special shell, and when you enter the
Toolbox.
special shell, not toolbox, not tool, it's a
Distro
transactional
box.
shell.
Oh,
It's not toolbox. So when you enter the transactional shell, it creates a Btrfs snapshot, and anything that you run in the shell installation modification, it applies to the new snapshot. And when
Wow.
you reboot into the new snapshot. So as far as I can tell, you can install packages in macOS, but they just do this. They do the same thing as Vanilla OS does with AB root. That anything you modify goes to the next snapshot, Btrfs snapshot.
So I'm curious about this toolbox thing that I've only ever actually seen this in Silverblue and Kinoite, where it starts up this shell to give
Toolbox
you.
and
I mean, can that be used to change configurations on the root,
no.
or is
Toolbox
that
and DistroBox are basically front ends for a Podman or Docker container. So you pull down. It's like a virtual machine without virtualization. You are still using the system's kernel, but you enter a separate environment. So it's like a cheroot, but you're not cherooting into a different computer. You're cherooting inside the box on your system.
so? Then when you stop using Toolbox, does that container get destroyed then, or
No,
is that
if you can I haven't tried Toolbox. I have tried DistroBox. As far as I know, they are very similar. You can create multiple containers. You can have a Debian container, a Arch container, a Fedora container. You enter the container. You have all the binaries that are in the container in the image. So DNF, apt, and pacman, and you can install packages inside the
feels like
container.
learning how to work Linux all over
Well,
again?
yeah, those are separate containers, right? Like
Yeah.
apt has
Yeah.
its own container, DNF
Yeah,
has
yeah.
its own container. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, but
Um,
the great thing is that you can, of course, you can install packages with the containers package manager, but you can run them, and it even works with graphical applications. So
And
I
and
tried it.
there's even like connections between the container and the actual root system,
Yeah,
so that
yeah,
you can make
because
configuration changes and
each
stuff.
container has its own root file system, but
Yeah,
it mounts your own home partition for them.
exactly.
So
Yeah.
you have
Okay.
your same configs, your same bashers, everything.
So
This
if
is
you
why I
open
think Vanilla's going to
Toolbox,
win. This is why I think Vanilla's going to win. Just simply
Yeah.
because I think they have the best implementation of this immutability thing.
You
I
open
think they have the best implementation of the containerization thing, and Apex, whatever it is,
Apex.
is probably by far the best way to handle all of it in like one central location.
Yeah. My only concern is that via this method you are using apt, pacman, DNF, the regular package managers. Those were designed to be managing your system and not a container. So maybe in the future there will be alternative versions of these package managers that are more optimized for a container, because I would assume that the package managers are just the standard package managers and they don't expect to be running inside a container. So, and by default, you don't have a separate init system for the container. So you cannot have services running inside the container. But you were asking, Bill, essentially you would want
that
to
hold
use
on.
it.
That doesn't. I don't see why that would be an issue. These things have been running in Docker forever. Like you can spin up Ubuntu
Yeah.
like as a Docker container, and then
And
you
you
can do
can
things.
have its separate PID one.
Yeah,
init
yeah.
system.
So
Okay.
yeah, I don't see any reason why doing it in a different kind of container. This uses Podman, right? Or is it
It can
LXC?
use both. That I'm using Podman because that's what's on Fedora. But
I almost got into Podman because I've been searching for a new hypervisor, and so I just used KVM and Cockpit on top of Fedora Server for a little while, and they have the plugin for Podman. I was like,
Yeah.
that could be nice, but it's
So-
not one-to-one with Docker, and Docker's what I know. So that was a little. It's a bit of a learning curve to go from one to the other. It's not quite a drop-in replacement like I expected, but it's almost there. It's pretty
Yeah.
close.
So the gist of it is that you want to use a Toolbox or DistroBox when you want to install a package that is not on your immutable system without having to modify your immutable system.
so anything you install with Toolbox will have its own container. Like if
No,
I install GIMP or
Yeah,
No, no, no.
DistroBox,
would it-
right?
You have the distro is the container. Like if you install if you tell it to do a DistroBox install Debian, it will pull the Debian image and you have one single Debian container. and everything you
Okay,
install
so
inside
You
goes
can
into
you
that
can
one
kind of
container.
think about this like I know it is not. I know it is not. But you can kind of think about this like as in running a VM of Debian and then running GIMP in Debian, but it's seamless. It just runs on your actual
so if I
system
want
itself.
the Arch version of
Yeah.
Audacity
Yeah.
and the Ubuntu version of OBS Studio or something like that, I can have
You can do that. Yeah.
basically the best of every world that way.
Or you can have 4 versions of Audacity. You can just have all
Yeah.
of the different Audacities from the different repositories and then just run them all side by side and figure out which one is the best. You can
Yeah.
actually do that. Yeah.
Well, I can see some value in that, really, because there are
Vanilla OS,
tools.
dude.
Yeah. I've got the website in front of me. It looks exactly like Elementary OS's website.
Now
But
they're moving to Debian, as far as I understand. But one of the things that is happening, that will happen in 2404, speaking of Ubuntu, is that Ubuntu will have an immutable offering now.
Yes,
It's going to be essentially Snap Core with a desktop on top that is just immutable like the rest of all these other things, and then you just layer snaps on top.
yeah, but maybe not the same way because, you know, Silverblue is that it gets built and it gets downloaded to your system, and there is no package management going on your system. But if you have the system components inside these snaps, which are like, I like to think of it as like package bundles that are also containerized. And I think what they are trying to do is that you have the system core, and then you have, for example, I know that they are moving the even in the regular Ubuntu the cups printing stack inside the snap. So each of these snaps are immutable in their own right and can be. So basically, you have, but that if they do that, then Ubuntu will essentially be a rolling system, because you can.
Great.
Yeah, that
yeah,
is
thank
good.
you.
My
So
only problem with
here's
yeah.
here's the real value add here for people like Bill that refuse to stop using NVIDIA stuff. That there is going to be a snap of a precompiled kernel with the NVIDIA stuff all built in. It's built in, and so you have this leaning tower of snaps, and all Bill has to do is say, "Well, I want the NVIDIA kernel," and they remove the normal kernel. They replace it with the NVIDIA kernel, and you reboot.
Yeah,
And you
it's
still have this immutable system, and it works with NVIDIA. It is, I think, one of the best ways to implement all of this stuff that's really kind of hard to understand for regular folks.
it's a modular system,
Yes.
and I
Yeah.
really, how
And
people
and
have
all
been
the old Linux heads are like, wow,
have been
modularity. But I hate Ubuntu
debating,
anyway.
the big old flatpaks versus snaps debate. I don't think it really makes sense because flatpaks and snaps are for
Yes.
two different things.
I agree.
The flatpaks are for sandboxing and packaging graphical applications.
And snaps are too.
Snaps,
They
yes,
do
snaps
that.
are for packaging and sandboxing anything on your system.
Yes. And this
Yeah.
is why I love running Ubuntu on a server. This is why, because snaps can do command line utilities, whereas I don't know if Flatpak can do it. They just don't do it. So there are no CLI utilities that I know of.
Snaps are
Flatpak.
kind of like Docker containers, but more
Right.
native to Ubuntu.
Exactly, and so this is what I've been looking forward to for years. I mean, Snapcore has been around for almost a decade, if not more, and this is what I've wanted for the longest time because you could see it coalescing back then. This is what Shuttleworth was talking about a long time ago. He had mentioned desktop back then too. It just that part, the desktop part of this whole Snap system from top to bottom, just never happened until. Well, it's going to be in the future in
Next
about
year.
10
only
months.
have one big problem / critique for snaps.
Okay.
Uh,
You're going to say theming?
System resource hungriness, because I think, because of the whole decompressing, loading into
Yeah.
memory and stuff like that.
So you need a powerful CPU to do
Yeah,
that
so
kind of stuff.
if you're running a flatpak of an application, a snap of an application, the snap version will use up more system resources, most notably RAM.
still here's what I would like to see, because I do love snaps. I love the idea of them, and I'm looking forward to an entire system filled with them. What I would like to see, at least for the desktop applications, is what pretty much every operating system does. They do caching, right? But Ubuntu can figure out which applications you run, the top 5 applications that you run in the first 5 minutes of opening up your system, and just preload them, pre-decompress them, so that they are ready to go in RAM. And when you click on them, there is no decompression time.
Yes,
So
but
I
you
know
will-
that it only takes like 2 seconds for Firefox to decompress and run, but instant is better. And I think if Firefox or Chromium or whatever snap it is that you run in the very first click that you make on that system should be pre-decompressed.
which
Yeah,
I
that would be a good solution. Also, in my case, what I like to know is there some kind of real world advantage to the compression and decompression?
No, I
as
mean,
opposed
other than
to,
updating, no.
Yeah. I mean, in the case here with Ubuntu, this way you can, for people that want to stay on the LTS, for example, but yet they still want access to more up-to-date software. Snap solves that problem for them because you don't have to worry about what's running on the back end. So I see the advantage of this system, so I'm willing to, sacrifice a couple more seconds, a couple more CPU cycles to, in order to get that up and running.
But battery life, though, it's gonna you take a hit in battery life because you have to
Boy.
decompress, whereas on other systems you would not have to decompress.
but my
Battery
answer to
life's
that,
one of those
why,
things, man.
I
Yeah,
wanted
no.
to ask why compress them in the first place, and the reason for that is because they need more space than regular packages, so compressing them reduces that. But I
Yeah,
think
but so
And
do
I don't care about that.
yes, but I think
Like,
it's
decompress
so do
easier.
it all,
flat
dude.
packs. I mean, that's
No, Flatpaks are not compressed at all.
Right,
They
so-
they use OS3, which is like Git for. So
I don't
if
mean
you-
that they're also compressed. I mean that they take up more space,
So-
and nobody
so-
even
An
considers
easier
that.
solution to my problem, the preloading solution, right? That is a bit complex, and it requires knowing things about your machine. I think another way to solve that issue is to give me a flag that I can set in Snapd that just says, as soon as you download it, decompress it and never compress it again. So it's always decompressed on my disk, and when I click it, there's nothing that needs to be
I
done.
That
think-
would be cool to have some
Yeah,
have some control over that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think what happens is it decompresses and doesn't go to your disk; it goes to RAM.
Right,
So
put it
on
in
the
disk. I don't care. Like I'll set up an entire partition. I have a 1 terabyte SSD, man. I don't care. Like I'll do the work to
Well,
make
not-
sure that
not
everything is instant.
necessarily have it decompressed, but maybe like you can have a tarball without compression. I would like to have that in Snap.
Well, that
You know,
would that
a
would
Sna-
require work on the server end, and I don't. That's gonna be too much.
But
so
they are like tar archives when you download them to begin with. I think they are like a
Right.
single file, so you can just they could just provide that file without compression, and you would solve it would take more space on the disk, but I think it's easier to upgrade your disk than upgrade your
right,
RAM, and
but
it's cheaper.
adding a flag to Snap to store them in a different file format,
Yeah,
as opposed
that's
to
fair.
making them store a compressed and an uncompressed version. I think the flag
Snap
is way
install
easier to implement.
tac compress equals no.
Yeah.
Foo.
Yeah, I mean, so wherever they live, wherever the snaps live, decompress them there,
Yeah.
because they have to live on your disk.
Yeah.
Just make them live there decompressed. That's what the flag should do. And that would be great.
When
I'd
they
love
live
that.
on the disk, they are like ISO. They're like ISO files that you can just mount as a loopback device.
Right.
I think.
So I mean,
So-
I'll use the CPU cycles up front to decompress them and store them in a way that Snap can still be used and everything, and it just goes straight into RAM without decompression.
There's got to be a way to do that. There's got to be a way to hack
Yeah,
it.
yeah. That
get
way,
to it.
every subsequent launch will just be
Yeah.
instant. Even after a
Yeah.
reboot, it'll be instant. That'd
And
be cool.
these issues are only really present on the desktop because you maybe reboot a server once a week, so you can
Dude, let me
extract them once
let
a
me
week.
log into my NAS. I'll tell you the last. Actually, it was no, it was a few days ago. There was an electrical storm and it killed my switch, dude. So everything had to come down. So it probably has like 5 days of uptime.
Yeah,
But
mine.
before
rarely
Remind
that,
us
it
what
was-
state you're in, Leo.
Texas.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's either just like a slight sprinkle, or a massive electrical storm. Those are the
God
only
hates
two
you.
options you get here.
Yeah.
And then sometimes when you get those electrical storms, it's like tornado as well. So, it gets a little hectic sometimes. And when it starts lightning all over the place, I have to go and unplug stuff. Because, man, surge protectors, yeah, that's tough.
They're a bit of a gimmick, aren't they?
Yeah. I mean,
I
they
think of
work,
them
right?
more.
They're not for lightning strikes. They are
No.
for when your power grid sucks, which we also
Yeah.
have that, and for those fluctuations. That's what power surge protectors are for. They're not lightning surge protectors.
They're for me. They're for like plugging 9 things into one outlet.
Yeah, exactly. It's just a power strip.
Yeah.
But yeah, man, like, what is it like? Oh, 30,000 joules, man. Do you know how much power is in a lightning strike? Not even close. So
It's like somewhere in the
it's
order
not
of
what that's
millions.
for.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not what that's for at all. And we get that a lot. So I just have to be physically careful with my gear, because that switch was a $200 switch, man. So I'm going cheaper now because it's the second switch. These were the Cisco business ones.
Was
the one
it
prior to that was
big one like
250.
this?
No, it was 10 port. Just
Oh.
a 10 port. But I want fanless because this is out in my living room because I like the blinky lights at night. Oh, it looks so cool. But yeah, it was a 10 port, but it was a small business, so it was like a layer 3 switch, had VLANing, all the QoS, all the
Yeah,
fancy
this one
features,
ain't got
man.
none of that shit. Just
Oh yeah, and so the first one I had, this was like 8-9 years ago, was $250. It lasted about 4 years, and then the new one I got was about $200, and that lasted 3 years, which was about a week ago. And then I got a new one, TP-Link, has those same features, but it's their small business Omada thing. So if you're familiar with how Ubiquiti access points work, TP-Link's Omada is the same thing, but it has everything is cheaper. The router is like 60, the switch is 90 for an 8 port, and the access point is also 80 or 90 or something like that. But they're all single pane of glass, right? So you can configure them all in one spot, which is really cool.
I wanted to
anyway.
make a reference to 1.21 gigawatts, but the topic has changed.
Yeah, no, that's about the lightning strike. This is why I have those switches in the first place. So yeah, too many gigawatts killed my switch.
Oh, all right. Well, we probably ought to get out of here so I can
No.
retool everything.
No, what I need to know, Bill. I asked this before,
Uh-oh.
and y'all never answered. You never answered. Give me 5 minutes. Why do you encrypt?
The hard drives
And
or
we're talking
my
about
laptops.
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
I take them on the road, and they sit in the sleeper of my truck when I'm outside the truck. And there's all kinds of fantastic ways of breaking into these trucks with minimal effort. And I want the peace of mind of knowing that the only thing they're going to get is a paperweight that they have to nuke and pave to get it to work.
So you do whole disk encryption or just home?
the whole disk, the whole doggone thing. Because I don't do a separate home. I used to do a separate home partition, but then I noticed that applications that are trying to access things in the .config and .cache directories,
right.
they you want that to be on your fastest drive too. So
Oh yeah.
what I started doing is with ButterFS, I would mount the I would create subvolumes for like documents, videos, blah blah blah, and then mount those to the corresponding folders in the home directory. And then I found a cool mount option for the FS table called x-gvfs-hide. And because if you don't use that, each one of those subvolumes will be recognized as a separate external storage device. And they'll like show up on your desktop if you've got that enabled, and then your file manager will show that it just clutters everything up. But if you use that xgbfs hide option, it hides all that away from the file manager and everything.
Are these subvolumes on the same disk as the system or a separate disk?
On one of them, it's on the same disk. On the other, it's on a different. Well, on the other one, I've only got one subvolume.
Bill,
on the-
reproducibility. Reproducibility.
No, well, they've got very different uses. These two machines,
Yeah.
the I've got a production subvolume. I call it production, and that mounts to a folder called production in the home directory. Everything else is on the faster NVMe drive. That way I get the best performance, but yet I can separate these things out. And the Lux encryption built into the Arch install on their official ISO, when you set everything up to encrypt, it's just one password and it opens everything. So,
That's pretty cool.
yeah, it actually works really well. You get the grub menu if you've got it enabled, and then once it gets past that, you just get a little password prompt at the top, and then it takes a little longer to boot, but it's worth it to me because now I know that if somebody gets it, they're not going to get my SSH keys, oh my gosh, the WireGuard config to get back into this network. And
Oh, it's simple to just rekey everything.
yeah, it is, but I don't want to do it.
That's true. Hey, I can respect that.
It's yeah, it and it would be kind of fun, with all the stress that would go along with being robbed. It would be kind of fun knowing that they would start this thing up, expecting it to go to Windows so they can play their stupid games.
Yeah. Well, I think that's already enough of a deterrent. They're like, what the heck? Throw that away.
Yeah, Lux, enter Lux encrypted password or something like that.
Yeah.
Like, okay, this ain't right. So, I mean, they would be able to get it to work. I mean, they would just nuke and pave it and that, but they would not have
Right.
my shit.
Well, that's the
And
whole point of encryption, right? It's not
yeah.
it's not to prevent them from using the stuff. It's to prevent them from getting your personal stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
But if you think about it, if you were running, for example, Silverblue, and the system was identical to every other Silverblue system, then it would make sense to only have the home subvolume encrypted.
I've got a reason for running Arch on those devices too. I need to know that nothing is trying to get on the internet because I have to use really crappy internet technologies when I'm on the road, like tethering to my phone and whatnot. So I need to know 100% that there is nothing on this machine that is going to try to call back to the mothership to see if I need updates or some crap like that. So it kind of rules out anything that's got an automatic package manager or anything,
So basically, package kit, I think.
Well, I mean, the software that runs on the front end, like your GNOME software or any of these things, you don't want it to the least little bit of bandwidth can make the difference.
But really, what is controlling everything that connects the graphical front end, the software center, to the package manager's package kit.
Oh, yeah, on Arch, yeah.
For example, on Fedora, people complain about how long it takes to refresh repos, and I kind of agree. Now it's gotten better with 38. I just have packagekit set to periodically refresh the repos in the background. So when I type DNF upgrade, sometimes it just instantly spits out the list of packages it has to update. And when you think about it, it's interesting when you go into GNOME software and tell it to install something like OBS. GNOME software tells packagekit to install the thing, and then packagekit tells apt to install the thing, and then apt tells dpkg to install that package. So it's a whole. I'm not sure if it makes sense because I think apt does the on Debian systems, apt does the dependency resolution and the downloading, and dpkg does the actual installation.
There you go, kids. All right, we'll be back in 2
deeper.
weeks. Get a hold of us, show@linuxotc.org. Comment directly on the website. Hit us up on our socials. Anyway, that's enough for now. Let us know what you think. We'll be back in 2 weeks. Until then, I've been Bill.
I've been Norbert.
I'm still Leo.
See you, folks.